Hello, everybody. Welcome to the ESI Digest. But as you can see, this is a little bit different than the normal format that we do because this is the end of year episode. So what we're going to be talking about is actually not the week's biggest esports stories, but the year's biggest, and the impact the esports industry and the business and the stories that have come from it have had on this entire sector. I'm joined by two members of ESI, starting with Kerry, the head of multimedia content, and also Jake, who is our features editor and trending news writer. So guys, how are both of you?
Yeah, doing well today. Happy to be here and excited to go through these stories with you, gents.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a big year. I'm looking forward to looking at dissecting the biggest trends this year.
I mean, let's be honest, it's been absolutely huge. So let's start off with, we unanimously picked 6 stories that we thought actually, encompass the esports industry across a range of sectors, across a range of different business ideals as well. But I think when we were doing all this, there was only one thing that came to mind, and that was cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency was absolutely huge in the esports industry. So, Kerry, do you want to, kick us off and talk a little bit about what is a major cryptocurrency partnership and the cryptocurrency phase that actually had happened this year?
Yeah, for sure. So at Esports Insider, we had reported on over 25 cryptocurrency partnerships in the esports space, and over 15 that also involved or that were focused on NFTs. So that's a total of over 40 huge stories this year in crypto. So as you just said, Tom, it is clear that this was the year of cryptocurrency and esports, and arguably the biggest one, and the one that everyone was talking about and probably will see the effects for many years to come, is the TSM and FTX deal. And that was just such a huge valuation and so impactful in that it required TSM to adopt FTX in their naming. And where this really gets interesting, I think, is the fact that Riot didn't allow TSM FTX to have that naming representation in the LCS and didn't walk that back. But the LCS then later partnered with FTX as well. So, crypto is a very interesting space, and by nature being decentralized and sort of no controlling parties involved. So it is still a gray area, of course, but we saw so many crypto partnerships focused on the North American continent, but outside of the North American continent as well. So I just think that we would be remiss not to spend some time to talk about crypto and esports coming together. But I mean, the biggest example of that, I think, is and was the TSM FTX deal.
Yeah, I mean, I'll personally fight anyone who doesn't think that cryptocurrency has been the biggest trend this year. It's just, it's undeniable, right? This deal, $210 million over 10 years, that's huge chunk of money. And I think it also perfectly epitomizes this trend that we've seen that, the people in the cryptocurrency industry are seeing the valuable overlap with the esports industry in terms of audience. All the hallmarks, they're young, they're tech savvy, they're already into cryptocurrency already. They're male dominated, all of these valuable marketing demographics overlap perfectly, and people are starting to see the value in that. And the esports industry is starting to see the financial benefits of that clearly from this deal.
I think you're completely right. I think it's so interesting. I think how the sector is changing into the sense of actually accommodating to cryptocurrency. And I think the TSM and the whole FTX partnerships in general kind of epitomizes that, in my opinion, because you actually look at the TSM FTX deal and immediately it was the LCS was like, right, you're not allowed that branding on there because it's cryptocurrency. Similar to what, as Kerry, I know you've done a lot of work on it with alcohol brands in kind of esports and stuff like that. So it's like, originally alcohol brands weren't allowed in certain titles, but now in the LCS, they are actually allowed in. And I feel like a very similar thing is happening now with cryptocurrency. And now that we're seeing the LCS actively partner with FTX as well, it does then make me think, is in the future, maybe not next split, or maybe not even this year, is in the future those rules itself also going to be a little bit more lax? So this isn't just kind of a partnership of actually, a massive figure, which it obviously will be, and it'd be enough to warrant being on this list anyway. But it's actually something that could change in the actually how tournament organizers see cryptocurrencies from a sponsorship standpoint, and obviously from many other standpoints. Because let's be honest, like if the worry is like a lot of worries with cryptocurrency, let's be honest, like the validity of them and kind of whether they are just and right, and there are still some minute problems or some major problems in some cases for some people as well. The fact that the LCS has partnered with FTX and then TSM has partnered, TSM partnered with FTX and then the LCS partnered with FTX. Clearly, LCS feels that FTX is absolutely fine as a partner in itself. And so it does make you think, is there going to be like a vetting period with cryptocurrencies and saying, you're allowed to partner with this one and have these on your logo? Because we also know that there are differences between different companies within. And I think you're right. Like cryptocurrency is absolutely huge. It's one of the biggest kind of industries growing right now, and alongside esports, which is really interesting. And I agree with you, Jake. Like the actual kind of combining of these audiences was bound to happen. And we've not even jumped into the fact, of like blockchain and NFTs and everything that even surrounds this entire deal. It's absolutely huge.
Yeah, no, it is interesting that crypto is treated the same as gambling and beer in a way that it has to be regulated differently. It would be interesting going forward to see whether more people in esports start opening it up as something that doesn't have to be regulated. Whether it can just be treated as just another normal sponsor. And I think the partnership with the LCS is an example of that. And we have to talk about the tension here, right, between the partnership with the LCS and then the partnership with TSM, and the fact that it was just months afterwards, right, that they signed the same sponsor, and then they prevented TSM from using their branding in their titles, and then they used the branding in their titles themselves. So I mean, right, we need to talk about that tension.
Yeah, and not to mention also the fact that LOL Esports has had a long-standing partnership with MasterCard. And with that, does it come with, are there any stepping on toes happening? The MasterCard is a official large sponsor of the LEC. So is that potentially, prohibiting FTX from partnering, or other cryptocurrencies from partnering with other regional leagues with Riot, or even splashing and spending a lot of money trying to sponsor Worlds or something? These two categories of traditional finance and then decentralized finance, do they really overlap? And not only that, as you were mentioning, Jake, really interesting that we also saw a lot of gambling this year, and gambling has still not really been sanctioned by Riot. And definitely there are a lot of rules of where you can target advertising, and I think there's a lot of due diligence that must be done in managing your audience and where you can put certain messaging and stuff. So I think that, it's interesting that cryptocurrency sort of falls within this high risk sort of sector along the lines of gambling, but also alcohol, and also, at least in the US, it's legal a lot of places, marijuana, these sort of messaging and products. But then, on the other side, it is somehow related to a very stable, safe industry, which is finance and bank institutions. So I think next year will be a really interesting one, and potentially other, more traditional finance partnerships will maybe expire, and other orgs and leagues will pursue crypto money in a sense, because as you were mentioning also, Tom, crypto is built on the blockchain, and the blockchain has more potential than just as a financial means and a ledger in that way, that they're working with blockchain companies can also lead to, as we also mentioned, NFTs, but also potentially if there are metaverses being built on the blockchain or other sort of play to earn titles, these sorts of things. So there theoretically could be a lot more diverse options in working with blockchain companies than just traditional finance partnerships.
Yeah, 100%. Now, before we fall down the metaverse rabbit hole, I think we better move on. If I'm being honest, that is a 2022 end of year one, I'm guessing. That is a prediction that it's going to be metaverse. But let's actually go on to something which is really interesting. It's actually still League of Legends related, but it's actually the fact that our second biggest story to us was the fact that Schalke sold its LEC spot, to Team BDS for what was 26.5 million euros. It was a significant amount of money, but it really highlighted the growth of League of Legends. And again, the potential growth of this industry as well, considering that in 2019, they only paid 8 million euros for that spot. I think this is an unbelievable deal. I think it kind of really solidifies actually a monetary value on what these franchise leagues were worth for the LEC especially. And I really want to see what your guys' takes is and actually seeing this figure for the first time and actually the transparency that Schalke had throughout this entire process when it came to selling up their spot.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge return on investment, right? It's really good to see in esports. But there has been like so much speculation around these franchise slots. It's all been, these huge figures are thrown around, but it's never been confirmed whether they're actually worth that. So it's really interesting to see that it is, people are willing to pay that now. And as you said, I think it really reflects the maturity of esports generally, but also the growth of League of Legends as an esport.
Right. And I mean, it served as like the first real, proof of concept of the franchise esports league, play, basically everything out, because this is the first exit. It now sort of provides a benchmark, a precedent, something that you can really see. Okay, someone has purchased a slot for this amount of money and they were able to exit at this valuation. So now it gives everybody a sort of market value of what at least an LEC slot is. But then, with probably a lot of math, you could maybe apply this to also the Overwatch League or the Call of Duty League or other League of Legends leagues. Also maybe provided Riot something to consider as they introduce the new Valorant leagues as well. So it was very important. And, as they say, you got to break an egg to make an omelet. And unfortunately, Schalke was that egg in this instance, but was also even more interesting because as Schalke was very transparent about the reason for the sale was that the football club financially was in trouble. So it was also very interesting that they were able to use an asset in their portfolio, which was their investment in the LEC slot, to return on that to help even other things out. That it honestly wasn't a money sink and really didn't end up costing them too much. I mean, it begs to be seen yet in terms of the cost that they spent on players and coaching and staff and these other things that needed to be spent. But I imagine that they made at least a little bit on that sale.
Yeah, the fact that they were able to actually make like money off an asset on esports is something that you probably could have never said 5 years ago. I think the only interesting point as well is the only other time from what I can remember of actually someone kind of buying in and buying a slot was in the LCS. And I believe it was the whole Echo Fox drama. And I think it ended up being Dignitas, I think, in the end, which ended up acquiring that spot. I might not be off the top of my head. I think it was that one, but that was obviously mirrored in so much kind of, drama and controversy that kind of happened within Echo Fox itself. And the fact that figure was never like publicly disclosed. I think the fact that, they're willing to even disclose figures like that. And we're starting to see, in like a wider point as well, we're starting to see a lot more of these figures being disclosed. Gone are the days, I think, hopefully in the next couple of years where everything is, we received an investment. We're not going to tell you how much it is. We received a partnership. We're not going to tell you how much it is, because these figures are now probably getting a little bit more lucrative in terms of like a media standpoint as well. These companies are willing to say, TSM, yeah, we made $210 million off this deal. And, Schalke saying, yeah, we made 26 million euros off this. Yeah, I like the fact that now companies have been a lot more transparent over financials as well. And that's kind of an overarching thing that happened this year as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you tripled your money in a short space of time, of course, you might as well show it off, right? But it's also interesting that it comes just after the pandemic, this news, with the inevitable hit on finances that has come from that. So, we're just coming out of the pandemic, we're still in it, but, just gone through the brunt of the pandemic, and they're still able to sell their sport for 26.5 million euros, which is pretty interesting, especially considering that we've been hearing rumors from the Activision franchises that, of discontent of some team owners not really happy with their return on investment and their revenues, especially during the pandemic. So the fact that they're able to sell their sport for so much shows that maybe things are going better in the League of Legends camp.
Also sort of plays into, or like perhaps maybe even influence, like an org like Ninjas in Pajamas,
just
figuring out a way.
Totally from it.
Figuring out a way. There's no more. They're not making any more LEC slots in Ninjas in Pajamas based in Sweden. They figured out a way into another league, the LPL, and I mean a third. I heard recently that like a third of all esports fans are China based overall, and I mean with Tencent being or owning Riot and all these other things, theoretically the LPL could be one of the most profitable franchise leagues around. It's not very clear about what a buy-in costs there, or financial details are not so clear, but this could have been a very interesting sort of use case for Ninjas in Pajamas to say, okay, if potentially this doesn't work out, or if we need the money, theoretically, this is actually a good investment. And Ninjas in Pajamas is a legacy org. They know what they're doing in esports. They've tried many different things. They've also recently expanded into FIFA as well with the partnership with Team Gullet. But coming back to the LEC, I think it really puts a value for the first time on a tangible value of what a regional specific esports league can be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think the fact that we're starting to see the likes of FC Barcelona recently announced that they're going into a Spanish regional league, not even the top division, and the likes of PK is also going in that division. And De Gea has announced that he wants to go into League of Legends. And you can probably imagine someone like Crew, Aguero's team, also probably looking at League of Legends, considering the success that they've had at Valorant. So really interesting kind of seeing these sports stars also looking at League of Legends, and not just the traditional route of, let's go into FIFA, or I'm an NFL player, let's have a look at Madden. They're actually looking at these now as business opportunities within League of Legends and within other titles as well. I think it's going to be incredibly interesting. And I think we're going to see even more kind of announcements and news and investment in the space, and hopefully it kind of bleeds out into other sectors as well. We're starting to see a little bit with Rainbow Six Siege, which I think is also quite an interesting one that happened with Jesse Lingard announced that he wants to go into Rainbow Six Siege, which I think is really interesting in itself. So let's move on though to our third story. And our third story is FaZe Clan going public. Now, Kerry, I know that you really want to talk about this one, so I'll push this one out to you. Why is this important, Kerry? Go on, tell us, please.
I mean, not that I'm an expert on anything other than I just find lots of things in the esports industry fascinating. But I mean, for me, this just sort of proved the concept of an relatively eloquent exit strategy. I mean, FaZe has been around for such a long time. FaZe has had a few controversies. They've had multiple rounds of investments. They have expanded into avenues pretty, decently removed from esports, like a lot of content going on. I mean, I'd be remiss not to mention the Save the Children scandal, but also I think in a way this sort of proves that not that FaZe didn't have any other options, but that they had a really good option in being acquired via a SPAC, and then also getting the alleged over $1 billion US dollars valuation, making FaZe theoretically the first esports unicorn. So, I mean, that's a notch for their belt for sure. And that definitely, I think, sparked a lot of headlines and got a lot of people interested in this, but also, again, gave a sort of proof of concept of an exit strategy for an organization that started and was so deeply rooted in esports to sort of blow through if there was ever a perceived glass ceiling, to become something much bigger and become, really a mainstream brand, or at least something that can be considered as, this is something that now also all of the fans will be able to invest in, because according to the article, that by next year they should be listed on NASDAQ. So this also gives FaZe a lot more options to continue growth and continue acquiring funds and not needing to do private raises anymore. That option was maybe no longer on the table. It didn't really seem feasible to attract people for yet another series round. Semi-related to that is 100 Thieves, having their Series C round, raising $6 million. But I think a lot of people, while they compare 100 Thieves to FaZe Clan, I think they are very different and have very different strategies. And with the 100 Thieves news, they made it clear that they really are interested in acquiring other businesses. They acquired High Ground, the sort of lifestyle brand, or keyboard or peripherals brand, which really fit in the 100 Thieves house, I think. So this sort of strategy also, or I think it in a way sort of follows the same strategy, where potentially for 100 Thieves, are they going to, be able to do a Series D if they need to, or is sort of the only option to figure out a way to go public to continue their growth? So for me, this just shows, esports investment is still happening, but I think potentially investors are thinking, okay, let's get this thing out of the esports pond and into a larger ocean.
I think especially like going into in terms of investments as a whole, but just focusing on FaZe right now, I think it's incredibly interesting to see FaZe be the one to kind of be the torchbearer, I think, in terms of the outside media perception. And I think that's very interesting, because we talk about this esports bubble, I think, so much. And, I think there's a perception of FaZe in the esports community, because the fact of the matter is that FaZe have very much cemented their roots within esports and then diversified outside of that into lifestyle and gaming. Whereas I think from a media perspective, from like a general media perspective, I think that a lot of people kind of define FaZe as the biggest esports organization and probably the world's most known esports organization. That's why they're on Sports Illustrated, I think it's very interesting. And I think that kind of really solidifies that when I saw this figure and I saw this valuation, because all of these investments, all of these valuations, they're not something which is going to be, they're not valuing FaZe Clan at $1 billion because FaZe Clan is worth $1 billion now, really, in my opinion. I think we're valuing them for what they could potentially be in 5-6 years. And I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah. FaZe does have a lot going for it, as you've just outlined. But even so, this is still a huge valuation, and I don't think many people were expecting it to be just this big. I noticed, Kerry, that you said theoretically the first unicorn earlier, and I think that highlights that it raises interesting questions about how much esports organizations are worth. This is by far the biggest valuation we've ever had for an esports organization. Other ones are in Liquid was $310 million, I think, evaluated earlier this year. And to be fair, like you said, FaZe does a lot more than other esports organizations in terms of positioning itself as a gaming culture brand and all that as well. But it does beg questions about why and what it's doing to be worth almost triple its competitors.
I think this really does actually put into the opinion of what is an esports valuation. And I think, a lot of valuation companies, very much have this debate, which is FaZe's valuation purely because of esports? No. So then are they classed as a pure esports valuation? Is it, 300 million is an esports valuation and 700 million a gaming valuation or a lifestyle brand valuation? I think it's very hard, I think, to actually value esports because a lot of the time other things go along with it. I think the only other thing I can think of is maybe like a team like Team Liquid, which is very much considered itself as just a premier esports organization. Their ethos is we are going to be the biggest esports organization, whereas you look at the FaZe model and it isn't that. You know, FaZe obviously wants to do well in esports titles, but the mindset is on, you know, apparel, lifestyle, gaming, culture, you know, all that kind of thing. Same with Exec, you know, very much have been that we are going to be a culture brand. 100 Thieves slowly going towards that and probably always wanted to be that as well. So the whole valuation of what is an esports valuation is also like a very interesting topic that was raised, I think, throughout, especially when the most valuable esports organizations by Forbes, that list came out. Because it was like, well, what do you value esports as?
Yeah, that's what I was also going to just bring up, that it'll be interesting to see how these recent, with FaZe, and also we were just talking about TSM, how this is going to be reflected in the always controversial Forbes most valuable esports orgs. And just sort of the speculation about valuation and whether people agree or not. I mean, in a way, it is a lot of publicity. A lot of people see this. A lot of people in and outside of the industry cite this, refer to the Forbes list and whatever. So it is definitely, it pays to be on this list, I'm sure. However accurate it is, that remains to be seen, because as we mentioned before, so many deals and partnerships and handovers of money are opaque, and it's just not made known for people in the industry or people without or outside of the industry. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see if Forbes agrees with these valuations, and also we'll see how much we all agree with Forbes.
Yeah, definitely. So let's move on to what is our next story, our fourth story out of the 6 here. And it is about Vindex rolling out hundreds, I say, of Belong arenas across the US. Now, this was a story when Vindex acquired Belong, essentially, you know, from the UK. They wanted to bring over these Belong arenas to the US, and then the pandemic happened, and it was kind of like a sad story of kind of what Vindex was actually going to do with this Belong kind of franchise. But the first ones are starting to be rolled out, and Jake, I know that you've been really covering this, and you kind of wanted to see how this has developed, and what are your thoughts, Sarah, of kind of finally Belong being in the US, you know, like, and this is actually like probably the first like start of what is going to be a major expansion there.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a huge expansion. I think it flew under the radar a bit just how big this was. I mean, they're rolling out hundreds of arenas across the US, and they've already opened their first ones in Texas. And you know, they're partnering with all the big peripheral brands and stuff like that. And it's part of a $300 million investment that they announced last year to do this. And yeah, I mean, the reason I find it interesting personally is because I think Vindex, or Belong, whatever one you want to call it, they're betting on this trend that hasn't happened yet, which is people will want to game and play esports in person. And they're not the only ones. Like Nerd Street Gamers and Allied Esports are doing similar things in the space. It's just really interesting because, like, I think there's definitely a good idea here, but we haven't actually seen it yet. Like, especially with the pandemic, people aren't gaming in person; they're gaming online more than they ever have before. So it's just very interesting because of that timing. You know, despite the pandemic, they've gone ahead with it. Their Index are looking longer term than just the disruption from the pandemic. They really believe in this idea. And you know, just as the world was going digital, they're deciding to go physical. So yeah, that's what I found interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, like as you were mentioning, Jake, it sort of remains to be seen if this sort of PC bang internet cafe introduction into the West is, and at a later stage now, is going to take off. I remember being a teenager, and we had these sort of LAN cafes, internet cafes still. I mean, when this was, you know, still dial-up days also. So like it was a thing. You didn't always have good enough internet at home or a good enough computer to play World of Warcraft or to really play competitively with your friends. So you needed a LAN setter, but a lot of the business models just didn't make sense and many places closed. Whereas overall in Asia, this has been a trend for decades. So, I mean, I have faith because the team behind Vindex with Adam Apicella and Mike Sepso, they successfully brought this sort of broadcast esports that was very popular and sort of, invented in Korea. They successfully brought that concept to the US with MLG, which was then acquired by Activision Blizzard. And then they helped roll out the first like Overwatch League and such. So having them being the masterminds by having proved this concept, this potentially could have been, or with the acquisition of Belong, could be a continuation of their idea from years and years ago, that this is sort of the final piece of the puzzle. And within the Vindex ecosystem of being able to put on these high scale, amazing events and sort of facilitating for publishers that they don't need to build out an esports department, that they can hire Esports Engine to run the tournaments, but also to operate these leagues and broadcast it and take care of everything for them on the top level professional esports scale, but then also work on the pipeline and giving kids a chance to really be involved with their local communities as well. Have a sort of like hometown esports vibe where every Friday you go see who's there. And also, I think with the Belong sort of operation of introducing a sort of local team for each location, right? Each team, they sort of make up a new team brands that is represented on like a sort of, grassroots level, that then they can also have Belong tournaments in this way, that you can represent, your local team as well as, your other clans or leagues that you're involved in as well. So in a way, it makes sense to emulate this recreational sports structure of, I grew up playing ice hockey. So I was a part of all these different leagues, and we would also enter different tournaments. We had like a tournament team. We had recreational teams. I was able to play hockey 6 days a week. And with this, like physical structure, that you can attend, and with people whose job it is to give you structure in practicing and sort of get you up to a more professional level, as similar to being a physical athlete, to being, a gaming athlete as well. There is a formula, a structured lifestyle and practice, and being able to withstand critique and handle losses, and also just having that support and that the teamwork aspect is super important to developing esports if it's going to resemble the sports structure at all.
Yeah, essentially, I think the idea here is that they're trying to monetize grassroots esports. That the local team angle is something that Belong have been doing in the UK, and I presume that's part of their strategy in the US now. Is monetizing the grassroots esports, and having that local angle is obviously something that's always been missing in esports, and arguably has been one of the reasons it struggles with commercialization, is because a lot of esports happens at the grassroots level, but there's no way to monetize it. And so bringing people into a physical venue and, as you said, Kerry, giving them the structure and giving them the training and giving them that community is something that people might be willing to pay for. And that's, I think, what they're betting on.
Also on top of that, not only just esports orgs, but other brands. Like now with these local centers, now you can also within the Vindex ecosystem, they can say, hey, you want to target this audience here. We have these physical locations where you can not only, hey, you want to do a brand activation here, but you can also say, hey, this is where we're trying to grow our brand. So we can physically be in these arenas to host tournaments and stuff. As you mentioned before, Nerd Street has a similar operation with their local host and their partnership with a retailer as well. So, I think just now that Belong has broken ground, that the only way is up.
And I think it kind of concludes, to conclude this actually as well, it kind of highlights a different sector in which infrastructure is growing within esports itself. I think that's really, really interesting, because what we're seeing now is not only are these infrastructures being built towards a grassroots scene and a semi-professional scene, but we're now starting to see Overactive Media create an esports venue, like a 7,000-seater esports and entertainment venue. We're seeing HQs, which are looking to kind of integrate their esports teams. And that's where the esports teams are basically going to be like, that is the home base. So we're also starting to see developments within the professional scene, which we've seen quite a lot, but it's also that trickle down effect. Now we're seeing those developments in that professional scene. We're also now starting to see it at that semi-pro, that grassroots scene. And obviously, you know, a semi-pro team or an amateur team are not going to be able to afford venues. So what you have is you have kind of a hub for that. And I think that hub is the likes of Belong, the likes of Nerd Street. And hopefully this is going to be one of those plays where in a year's time that we're going to start seeing more of that, especially with hopefully the pandemic starting to, you know, get a bit more under control and everything like that. So let's move on to our penultimate story. And this is, for me, the creme de la creme, because I get to talk about mobile esports. So we managed to make it to 5 stories without me mentioning it once. But this story was probably, for me, one of the most significant mobile esports stories, not because of actually esports impact, but because of the connotations that it could potentially have on the mobile esports scene. And that was that ByteDance acquired Mobile Legends Bang Bang publisher Moonton for a reported $4 billion earlier this year. This was a huge, significant figure that saw ByteDance, a Chinese technology company, acquire Mobile Legends Bang Bang's publisher. And for me, this was kind of the start of my introduction from a personal thing of Mobile Legends Bang Bang, of actually realizing this figure and being like, wow, there's a mobile esports scene in the East. And then I then did more digging. I realized that, you know, M2 had 3 million viewers, peak viewership. M3, which is going on, had now still over 3 million peak viewers. There are viewers now watching these titles. And for me, this was so significant. I'm really interested, Kerry, for you, when you saw kind of this figure, like, what did that make you think? Because it genuinely shocked me. And in the esports industry, figures like that don't genuinely shock me because I expect it. But I think because it was a sector that I was so unaware of, it really brought to light for me mobile esports.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've been seeing a lot in the overall gaming industry, and then also it's been happening in the esports niche as well. It's just a lot of consolidation. And so I think it makes so much sense that, yeah, I mean, this acquisition is for a huge amount of money, but the idea is that it is going to be worth much, much more than that. I mean, we've seen Microsoft Studios acquired a lot of smaller studios as well this year and various others. What is also, I think, fascinating about this is that ByteDance is the parent company of TikTok and the Chinese Douyin. So that it's a technology company, of course, but it is most well known for its social media platform and viral short form video, which is also taking over social media in general. Everyone is sort of, not everyone, but so many of these other social media platforms have emulated the TikTok model with short form video and endless like For You page and scrolling and really dialing into what the algorithm figures out about you and giving you more and more of what you want. So it's super, super interesting in my eyes of, is ByteDance going to be able to implement this sort of technology within Montoon Studios? Are they going to take this that was just a sort of one-way road of just consuming content, video content? Are they going to be able to, you know, potentially serve you quests or challenges or characters or in-game purchases that are based on what you're interested in from what the algorithm knows about you? Are they going to have a profile on you across their different networks? I just think it's super fascinating in this sense, but also really indicative of just how much the industry is beginning to consolidate.
I mean, yeah, I think it surprised me too, this news, definitely. And I think it surprised a lot of people because a lot of people still underestimate mobile esports. Either they see it as something that's niche or they see it as something that's not really sports. There's still this pervasive idea that, you know, despite the viewership figures and despite the number of people who play this game, it's not seen as something that we should be taking seriously in esports. I think part of that comes from the fact that it's not as big in the West as it is in the East. So it's sort of easier for it to fly under a radar. But I mean, yeah, like the numbers speak for themselves, right? And I think more and more publishers are realizing that they can't ignore mobile esports anymore. Just this year, we had Rocket League launch a mobile version, and also Valorant announced a mobile version coming. So yeah, I think mobile is definitely one of the big things that for this year that we have to focus on. Tom, can you tell me a little bit about Mobile Legends Bang Bang as a game? Like, how does it fit into the mobile esports ecosystem? Because I have no idea what it is.
It's absolutely fine. So Mobile Legends Bang Bang is a mobile MOBA, essentially, which brings in a very interesting conversation of Wild Rift and League of Legends Wild Rift that kind of came through that, because both of these titles are, I mean, if I'm being honest, very, very similar. You look at a Mobile Legends Bang Bang game and you look at a League of Legends Wild Rift game, and they are very, very similar, like even in the sense of actually like destroying each other's bases, essentially, and leading up to that as well. So I think it's going to be very interesting to kind of see how this title goes. I think in terms of Mobile Legends Bang Bang from an esports scene, and this is my opinion, so take this with obviously a grain of salt. But when I saw ByteDance acquire Moonton, it for me felt a little bit like when Tencent bought Riot Games. And the growth that occurred as soon as Tencent bought Riot Games after that. And very similar, ByteDance acquired Moonton. Now we've got Mobile Legends Bang Bang in Brazil. We're starting to see Mobile Legends Bang Bang go into Brazil. They announced LATAM, Vivo Keyed, or Cade was one of like the teams which are involved. I believe Santos was also involved in like the teams which are participating. So I think that it's going to be really interesting from a mobile esports perspective, actually seeing where Mobile Legends Bang Bang goes now, especially in the West, considering we have got League of Legends Wild Rift also creeping up. Because I agree, I think there's only going to be one winner there. And I think Mobile Legends Bang Bang will always be popular in the East. I think, obviously, times can change, and maybe, I don't know particularly as much in the East, but maybe it's not as, it's more volatile in terms of the titles that can rise in prominence right now. But I think that it's all about that battle for the West. And I think both, I think all entities are actually looking at it. I mean, ESL themselves have launched their mobile division. The reason why they're launching a mobile division is because they probably want to be one of the first tournament organizers to kind of market that mobile sector. So I don't think it's just publishers. I think it's tournament organizers, and I think it's esports organizations as well, like Tribe Gaming, getting there probably 2-3 years earlier than everybody else in NA. Means that they got, I believe it was like San Antonio invested them. They've got loads of investors which have come through. Elgato have partnered with them purely because they were the first, and they were the first to do it correctly in NA. So I know I kind of like went off on a different subject then about Mobile Legends Bang Bang, but yeah, it's definitely a title that I think is going to have a lot of comparisons to Wild Rift and a lot of comparisons to League of Legends in general. But it'll be very interesting to kind of see how that occurs and what happens between the two.
Another interesting thing that I wanted to look up to make sure that this was right, but Tencent also tried to buy Moonton Games, and ByteDance outbid them.
Yes, they did.
So, and Tencent had sued Moonton before, also saying that Mobile Legends Bang Bang was a bit too close to League of Legends, and also Tencent also owns Honor of Kings as well. So there was this lawsuit. And then, I mean, even Tencent maybe saw the writing on the wall of how big this IP was and how popular it was growing. That was outside of its, League of Legends franchise and IP there as well. So they attempted to buy it, and ByteDance came in with, all of its other sites, businesses as well, supporting it, and could throw a lot more money at it, I guess, or perhaps their infrastructure was more fitting. We don't really know the details too much, but definitely interesting to note that ByteDance outbid Tencent on this one.
I mean, everyone loves a good narrative, right? It's esports. We love a narrative. And I think the narrative of, Moonton basically getting these two offers and then not choosing Tencent, who you could probably arguably say could be the safer bet in terms of developing an esports scene and developing a game. They've done it, ByteDance, while do have their own gaming division, it's nowhere near as popular as what you could say Tencent was. So we love a good narrative. And I think it'd be very interesting thinking about the future of what could have happened. Would we have had Wild Rift, like to the extent of what we had now, if, Tencent had purchased Moonton? Would it essentially have been like an Honor of Kings, Arena of Valor kind of situation where it'd be like Mobile Legends Bang Bang is the Eastern version of Wild Rift, and then your Western version is Wild Rift. Because for those who don't know, Arena of Valor and Honor of Kings are essentially the same game, but one is tailored towards the Eastern market and one is tailored towards the Western market. And they've just recently brought these two titles together, weirdly. Like, there are certain champion differences, but essentially it's the exact same game, just tailored to a different audience. So it really raises these possibilities of, if Tencent had bought Moonton, would they have been like, right, well, we'll keep Mobile Legends Bang Bang, but that is a purely Eastern exclusive, and then we'll have League of Legends Wild Rift in the West. So the possibilities are endless, but now we've got these two competing titles, of very similar mobile titles, and I think it'd be very interesting to see how both of them develop. So as we finish off the end of year digest, we're going to be starting, I mean, let's be honest, we've got to end it with a partnership. And I don't think there's been any bigger partnership than ESL and Intel. Probably one of the most well-known partnerships, I think, in esports. They announced a renewal of their long-term deal. Jake, I know, again, this is another one that you've been looking at. Can you tell us a little bit more about this deal? Because I've heard that it's pretty significant.
Yeah, so ESL and Intel, obviously, long-term partners, have renewed their partnership again. They've announced plans to invest $100 million in esports together over the next 3 years. And so that brings the partnership to it's already 20 years old, so it'll be 23 years old at the end of this. It's one of esports' longest running partnerships. It's one of its most well-known partnerships. Like, even people that don't follow CSGO and Dota, they know about the ESL Pro Tour. It's got Intel branding everywhere. So yeah, it's one of esports' most valuable partnerships, I think. And it's, in my opinion, interesting, not just because of the size of the money involved, but also because it's representative of a very welcome trend, in my opinion, which is that partnerships in esports are getting longer and longer over time. And brands aren't scared to commit big money over long time scales anymore, which is, I think, it reflects the maturity of esports in general. And, we saw multiple other decade-long partnerships this year, including the TSM deal, including the Alienware deal with Liquid. And yeah, I think it's just good news for the stability and the financial stability of esports organizations.
Yeah, and I mean, as you were mentioning, it is so old, and it's esports definitely needs its dinosaurs. If it's constantly just having new partnerships and really always just constantly reinventing itself, then it just won't have any stability. So having these real legacy partnerships, and especially with ESL being as old as it is as a tournament operator, this also helps it build, I think, to resemble more the legacy of sport, of just, these are leagues that have been around for a long time. People know what to expect. Your parents are a fan. Your grandparents have been a fan of this league or this organization. So we really, of course, esports is very fast moving. It will continue to be so, but it's just really good to see. And I think everyone is excited to see brands continuing to reinvest in esports, see the return on it, really care about the industry and wanting to spend their budgets on helping develop it, helping sustain it, and also have really integrating their brands into esports, because as we all know, lots of people are looking at esports, trying to figure out a way in, trying to convince people that it's worth investing in or whatever. So this is just another use case of, look at Intel, a very famous brand that's been deeply rooted for years. And, they were able to probably get in at relatively, a ground floor compared to now, if, to have such a big partnership as a new entry brand with ESL, in a sense, that price pool is going to be, that price point is going to be much higher. And it's, they have long-term relationship together. I mean, it makes sense to just keep them working together.
So I think what's really interesting as well is the fact that this isn't just like a partnership renewal. Like, despite the fact that these two entities have been together for 20 odd years, or going up to 20 odd years, the fact that this is actually an expansion as well. So that it's like Intel are continually asking for even a little bit more. They're expanding into other, I think it was non-CSGO tournaments and stuff like that. So that's not just the sign that they're just happy with the partnership which they have, but they're actually more willing to even be even more integrated into it despite all these times. And I think when you were mentioning it, that these long-term deals and everything that was happening, I think, Jake, what was really interesting when you mentioned the Team Liquid Alienware deal, and you're like, oh, it's a 10-year-old deal. It's like, it feels like nothing now when you compare it to ESL and Intel at 20 years. I thought that is insane when you're actually seeing all of these long-term partnerships. And as Kerry was saying, it really does highlight actually to a potential other brand. ESL can always go to it and say, well, Intel have been happy for us for 20 odd years and have never once, kind of said we're out, essentially. I think that's unbelievable to say that as an esports organization, an esports entity.
Yeah. I mean, 10 years is just a huge amount of time in esports. Like, esports in 2011 was just unrecognizable from what it looks like right now. Right. And yeah, I think Intel is obviously a very big company who probably have a legion of economists who are working on whether this deal is worth it. And the fact that they see potential in the esports industry, even after the pandemic, with all the disruption, that they still think this is still worth it for another 10 years is a good sign.
I think it's like one final point towards this deal as a whole as well, is it really does highlight, let's be honest, what has been a successful year for ESL again in terms of partnerships. This isn't their only partnership. This is definitely not going to be their last partnership. They've teamed up with a variety of different entities. And let's also give a little bit of a shout out to Rocket League. Obviously, ESL, the major deal that also came out today is the fact that ESL and DreamHack were, not today, but this year, was that ESL and DreamHack will continue their Rocket League partnership for the RLCS. And, I know, Jay, I'm going to leave this one to you. I'm going to let you finish off. Let's give a notable shout out to Rocket League. I know that you love Rocket League. Please talk us through what has happened with Rocket League this year. This is the unofficial 7th one. It was definitely a notable announcement, but for those who are unaware, what has happened with Rocket League in terms of partnerships this year?
So much has happened with Rocket League in terms of partnerships this year. The biggest trend is obviously car manufacturers partnering with Rocket League. There's obviously a very surface level obvious overlap between Rocket League as a car-based game and car manufacturers, and they've been cashing in on that. To put it simple, I don't know how many there are now, but there's been like Ford, Formula One, NASCAR, Lamborghini, what others. Just everyone seems to want to get in on this, and I suppose that makes sense. And yeah, Sonics really seem to have their heads screwed on, and they seem to be focusing a lot on their esports strategy. So earlier this year, they announced a huge expansion to the Rocket League Championship Series, the RLCS, which is their flagship event. It's now got a $6 million prize pool. They added 3 new regions, Middle East and North Africa, and two in Asia. And that's alongside North America, Europe, and Oceanic regions. So it's a huge expansion. Basically, it's a global circuit now. And, alongside a huge format change and everything. So I think they're really using this money from all these youth partnerships that they're doing in a wise way to really grow out their product. And yeah, I think big things are coming for Rocket League. I think it's really the viewership is up massively. I think it's going in a good direction.
I think we'll definitely end it there. I think ending it on Rocket League is like a notable inclusion in this list. I think is huge. I think it's going to be something that we're probably going to be talking about a lot in 2022. And that is it for this year's end of year digest. I do want to say thank you to Kerry and Jake for coming on and listening to me ramble a little bit while you guys actually say something of worth. I think that's always important. But I do appreciate, obviously, everybody who's also been watching the digest throughout the year as well. I really appreciate it. We've got a lot of new content, which we're planning to do in 2022. And yeah, this is it. This is it for me now. I'm done for the rest of the year. I'm not going to be doing anything else. I'm leaving everything to you guys. I'm just going to go and celebrate my Christmas holidays. Why not? We'll see what happens there. Or New Year's holiday, actually, probably at this time. But yeah, thank you everybody for taking part, and for Kerry and for Jake. And then also thank you everybody for watching and listening to me. And yeah, until then, we'll see you next year.